War is invariably tragic and cruel. On the battlefield, destruction reigns. In battle, it was the armor that bore the brunt of enemy attack. Arrows, spears, wet by the rain, sullied by the mud and trampled underfoot. The warriors of old went to great pains to see that their armor, destined for such rough handling and destruction, was made as attractive as possible. From the latter half of the 4th century to the 5th century, Japan was in a period of constant warfare, already by the appeared. Powerful clan chief's clay Haniwa figure. In the 6th century, Japan thirsted for cultural knowledge. The introduction of Buddhism from the Chinese continent brought many kinds of Buddhist idols to Japan. Among them were figures of warrior deities. Although almost no examples of armor of this period exist today, it is believed that it was from about this time that the form of armor began to undergo change. However, it was not until regional warriors began to make their own armor that armor distinctively Japanese in style came into being. In the 12th century, the early centralized state began to disintegrate. There ensued a period of wars between two powerful clans, the Genji and the Heiki. Battle in those days was conducted on horseback. Warriors dashed on horseback within range of the enemy and then released their arrows. In order to approach the enemy at close quarters, it was necessary for the attacker himself to be sufficiently protected. Let us see how armor protected the warrior on the battlefield. Iron plates known as kyubi and sendan protected his chest when the warrior was ready to fire. When attacking the enemy, the sleeve becomes a shield, and together with the helmet, makes the horseback warrior a sort of human armored tank as he charges forward. When the warrior swings his sword at the enemy, the armored panels protect him from attack from behind. However, perhaps the most distinctive feature of the armor at the time of the Genji and Heiki War was the fact that it was highly decorative, much more so than was warranted by its fundamental protective purpose. The 350 years encompassing the era of the Genji-Heiki conflict and the period of the ensuing shogunate regent government, founded by the victors, formed a golden era in the history of Japanese battle armor. The armor of this period is particularly classical in style and is now known as shikisho, or formal armor. At times, it is also known as oyoroi, or grand armor, referring to its extravagant splendor. These examples of armor, as well as the rounded form of the helmet and the deep, rich colors, all show the influence of an elegant art form. The braids, the main function of which was to lace together the iron plates forming the armor itself, were dyed in brilliant hues. In the same manner that the clothing of the aristocratic ladies of the court indicated their artistic taste, the warriors who rose up from the provincial regions manifested their artistic taste in their formal armor. Armor braid was sometimes dyed a dozen times to obtain the desired color. About 100 years ago, a portion of this armor was repaired, with braid dyed with chemical dyes. But today, this repaired portion's color has faded, while the braid dyed 800 years ago remains as bright as ever. The patterns of the armor of this period often reflected the season of the year in which it was made. This was due to the fact that plant dyes were made from indigenous vegetation, and also perhaps reflected the Japanese love of the changing seasons. The ancient warriors of Japan thus had their armor designed in colors as elegant and brilliant as the finery of court ladies. An autumn scene is depicted on soft deerskin for this lower breastplate. Such designs of flowers and the like are seen only up through the 13th century, when the influence of the old court culture was still strong. After that, it became customary to use designs symbolizing bravery and heroism, such as the legendary lion. Or dragon. The technique of braiding, which developed from about the 8th century, saw its most effective use in armor. This is a type of flat braided cord in which both sides show a hexagonal pattern. In artistic style, the craft of armor was no doubt mainly a reflection of the art of court culture. However, utilization of court art for ornamenting battle wear was an ironic twist. Cord for the back of the armor. These ornaments are made of pure gold. With what emotions did the warriors of old encase themselves in such works of art? This rich gold ornamentation reflected the sunlight and provided a brilliant accent to the armor of the warrior as he rode through the fields and hills. This is a red-laced formal armor adorned with gold. For lightness, the armor was made by lacing together iron plates and cowhide. The pieces were then lacquered to provide greater durability. More than a dozen coatings of the lacquer were applied. This process took from 2 to 3 months. For greater protection still, layers of volcanic ash were then applied. As each suit of armor was made to order, a warrior had to put in his order several months or even half a year in advance. The making of such expensive armor was a great economic drain on the warriors. However, warriors willingly sacrificed everything to have their fine suit of armor made. It was a disgrace to be clad in anything but the finest of armor. Formal armor raised the level of craftsmanship and created a new art genre. However, the warfare that gave birth to the battle armor destroyed peace and culture, robbed the people of their homes, and even of their lives. How did the rich beauty of this armor appear in the eyes of the fleeing commoners? At the end of the 13th century, a great army from China's Yuan dynasty invaded Japan. The battle tactics employed by the Yuan army was something that the Japanese had never seen before. The Japanese horseback warriors, clad in their fine armor, found themselves helpless before the lightly clad foot soldiers of Yuan. Due to the invasion from China and other circumstances, the power of the Regency government waned, and eventually the Japanese court split into two rival factions. A period of continuous warfare ensued. Battles, instead of being man-to-man combat, taking place in open fields, came to be conducted in group action in the hills. No matter how beautiful or how durable the old formal armor was, it was unsuited for protection in the new era, and formal armor became obsolete. Now, the simpler domaru and haramaki armor, the light body protectors, formerly used only by warriors of lower rank, came into their own. The helmet, visor, protective sleeve, and a girdle for holding the quiver were added to this simple body protector to make a complete set of armor. The era of fighting with bow and arrow had passed, and the era of spear fighting arrived. Warfare increased. Consequently, the demand for suits of armor increased, and armor makers sprang up in large numbers in the various regions. Even so, craftsmen were unable to keep up with demand. As a result, they began to dispense with time-consuming ornamental work and began producing unadorned armor. If the wearer emerged the victor in battle, the armor came to be considered an armor of glory. If the wearer was defeated, the armor became one of sorrow and chagrin. In the middle of the 15th century, powerful regional warlords overthrew the Regency government, and the age of civil wars began. At the same time, the second phase of the history of Japanese armor began. There is an interesting story of this war period concerning a particular suit of armor. This is the battle flag of Takeda Shingen, one of the most powerful warlords of the 16th century. Takeda Shingen made an offering to his clan's guardian god of a suit of armor, said to be so strong there was no need for a shield. The Takeda retainers took their oath of loyalty to their lord by swearing on this suit of armor and on the Takeda clan banner. Shingen, a man with the ambition of ruling Japan, had a series of battles with rival warlords. He was taken ill and died in the midst of battle. Shingen's son, Katsuyori, continued the fight, but was defeated by an allied force of several warlord armies in 1575. 7 years later, the allied army pushed into Katsuyori's base area with a large force. Katsuyori, unable to stave off the invading army, set fire to his castle. Then, taking along the family treasure, his father's armor that needs no shield, he led his force of little over 3,000 men to this rocky mountain for a final, desperate battle. The warriors defending the mountain, however, saw that the Takeda cause was lost and defected, refusing to allow Katsuyori into the castle. The retainers now began to defect one by one, until by the time the group approached Mount Tenmoku, which had been chosen for their last stand, less than 50 people, including the women and children, remained. Bandits, with an eye on the reward being offered for Katsuyori's head, lay in wait along the way. This small hamlet deep in the gorge was the site where the last survivors of the Takeda clan committed suicide. At this mountain temple are located the graves of the Takeda clan. Surrounded by the enemy force, Katsuyori, realizing that the end was near, carried out the traditional family ritual in which his 16-year-old son, Nobukatsu, donned the prized family armor. This was the Takeda clan's most important ritual, in which the young heir apparent was clad in the armor for his coming-of-age ceremony, as a sign that he was the future head of the clan. Nobukatsu's ceremony was a hurried one, carried out in the face of the impending annihilation of the clan. After the ritual, Katsuyori entrusted the armor to a trusted retainer, with the instruction that even if the Takeda clan should be destroyed, the armor was never to be handed over to the enemy. Soon afterwards, the entire company committed suicide. The Takeda suit of armor is an armor of tragedy. The armor of Todo Takatora, a valiant warrior of the age of civil wars, an armor of glory. Although there is no ornamental craft work to be seen here, the armor of this period shows the mettle of the warrior during the age of civil wars, a time when ability and actual strength counted more than family rank. This is the only female suit of armor in existence today. Tsuruhime, a daughter of a pirate clan of the 15th century, wore this as she stood at the command of a pirate force. This is an iron visor that came to be used with the simpler armor. Visors came into use as spears and guns took the place of swords as weapons. This helmet shows an attempt to depict the harshness of sheer cliffs. It is said to have shown a bright silver originally. This helmet depicts the flames, symbolizing the god of fire. This helmet symbolizes the guardian gods of fire. The warriors of the chaotic age of civil wars had no qualms about betraying their own lords, if those lords proved undeserving. A leader without power could not hope to hold his men. These helmets of strange design may have been symbols of the strong individualism of the warriors of this period. With the end of this Civil War period, Tokugawa Ieyasu emerged as the supreme victor and established the shogunate government. With this, the history of armor as a practical battle necessity ended. Even in the Tokugawa era, armor continued to be made as a symbol of the samurai spirit and was called Gosenzo-sama, or honorable ancestor. However, armor, which had lost its practical value, failed to show any further development artistically, and with the fall of the warrior class, it disappeared altogether. The warriors of old headed out for battle, sometimes for self-preservation, sometimes for ambition, sometimes for honor and glory. They kill their enemy, sometimes their own kin, and they themselves were often forced to die. Warriors heading for battle were constantly in the shadow of death. However, the warrior could allow himself to show no fear. It was not death that mattered, but the disgrace of his family. The warrior, in spite of his fear of death, had to think of fear of death as a disgrace. During the long centuries of the age of the warrior, the era of wars, the Japanese created countless armors of glory and countless armors of tragedy. This was the inexorable fate of mankind, caught in a world of bloodshed. The armor, the warrior's formal wear, his death shroud. The iron sheet that was the boundary between life and death. No wonder the warrior ornamented his suit of armor with the highest attainable craftsmanship. The glory of the clan, the chagrin of the warrior, the tenacious spirit that created a work of art from battle armor, have not outlasted the ravages of time. Today, only a few examples exist. Armor, changed in accordance with the manner of warfare. Some may be impressed by the elegant beauty and artistic sensitivity to be seen in the formal armor. Others may find beauty in the strong individualism revealed in the armor of the warriors of the age of civil wars. But in each suit of armor is secreted the poignancy of man and his fate. And the Japanese made it into a thing of beauty.